Rome wasn't built in a day, but many Roman emperors did try to see it in one. We're used to seeing them ride in on golden chariots or stride purposefully across marble floors. But what if your ruler was incognito? What if Caligula was really Cassius? Well, that sounds like the start of a bad 80s movie, but it isn't that far from the truth. Because while most emperors would have been happy just ruling the greatest empire on earth, some liked to spice things up by living double lives. They'd don disguises, hit the taverns, and even prowl the taxicabs, getting right up close and personal with the common folk. Here are just a few of the emperors who gave a damn about how their subjects lived. Commodus. You probably know him as the star of Gladiator. Russell Crowe punched a horse, stabbed a dude, and stared meaningfully at a sunset during 2 hours of screen time. But before he was busy saving Rome, Commodus was busy trying to save face. The son of Marcus Aurelius, the great philosopher-emperor, Commodus had big boots to fill, and he knew it. He took the throne in 177 AD and immediately tried to live up to his father's legacy. But he turned out to be a narcissistic and incompetent fool. And not long after he took the throne, the people of Rome were loudly complaining about him. So instead of fixing his problems, Commodus got even more paranoid and decided to spy on the masses. According to historian Cassius Dio, he would often disguise himself as a commoner and hang around taverns, brothels, and chariot races, pretending to be just another guy. Except, probably with all the gold chains, it wasn't so much that Commodus wanted to see how the other half lived. It was that he wanted to see how the other half talked about him. If he could find anyone saying anything bad about him, then they'd get thrown in jail or worse. Sometimes this would go on for weeks at a time, and for someone whose hobby was hunting criminals, he sure didn't make it easy for himself. Aurelian. When Aurelian became emperor of Rome in 270 AD, the empire was in rough shape. It was losing territory, the economy was collapsing, and people were tired of being ruled by a spoiled teenager. Yes, when Aurelian came to power, he was only 18 years old. His mother, Julia Misa, acted as regent until he turned 20, and she died. But even after that, he remained an inexperienced young man in charge of the entire Mediterranean. To get a better sense of the issues affecting his empire, Aurelian would often don disguises and travel around, sampling the food, prices, and overall attitude of the provinces. One time, according to the historian Herodian, he even rode on a barge up the Nile disguised as a woman. Don't ask us why he didn't just sail backwards. In this case, though, it worked like a charm. And after 10 months incognito, Aurelian was able to turn the fortunes of the empire around, winning battles, minting new coins, and restoring order throughout the land. Sure, he was eventually murdered by his own grandmother, Julia Misa, but at least he went out knowing he'd made a difference. Starnopolis. You can't talk about partying like the Romans without mentioning Starnopolis. That's a name synonymous with debauchery. Unfortunately, we don't know too much about him, mainly because he was a bit of a private person. Yeah, we'll explain. Sardanapalus was the spoiled teenage son of Roman Emperor Publius, and he loved nothing more than going out at night and getting into trouble. Since the citizens of Rome might not have been too keen on partying with the future emperor, he'd often disguise himself as a commoner and go out incognito. This led to quite a few run-ins with the law. Once he got so drunk, he fell asleep in a bakery and was arrested for public intoxication. Another time, he crashed a gladiator fight and got into a huge brawl. When his guards finally found him, they had to pay off the gladiators to let him leave. These wild escapades continued until he took the throne, following his father's assassination, after which he put a stop to all those shenanigans. Trajan. Speaking of emperors who partied a little too hard, meet Trajan, one of Rome's most beloved emperors. He took over in 98 AD and immediately set about making his dream of a second Augustus come true. He expanded Rome's borders, introduced new building projects, and launched successful military campaigns. Basically, he seemed destined to be a legend. But how does a guy keep up that kind of energy? Simple, he stays classy, takes care of business, and gets plenty of shit. Oh wait, sorry, wrong Trajan. We meant to say Trajan, the party dude. Sorry, Hadrian. Unlike the future emperor, Trajan loved to get down and dirty on the streets of Rome, and instead of sticking to taverns or brothels, he'd often hit the clubs, dancing the night away until sunrise. The only problem is, he wasn't known for being a great dancer. As Suetonius puts it, he had a certain cloish way about him, and his limbs were stiff and clumsy. So if you ever saw a guy doing the funky chicken in 112 AD, chances are it was Trajan Antoninus. After Caligula was assassinated in 41 AD, his uncle Claudius took the throne. He tried his best, but he was slow, stuttery, and easily influenced by the scheming women in his life. So when he passed away in 54 AD, the Senate was eager to move on. Enter Nero, the teenage stepson of Claudius, who'd been groomed for power since birth by his mom, Agrippina the Younger. Now, we don't want to spoil anything, but let us just say Nero didn't exactly become the beacon of hope the Senate was hoping for. Before he took the throne, though, Nero had a bit of an image problem. Everyone thought he was a spoiled brat, and no one expected him to amount to anything. So to get a better read on the people of Rome, Nero would often disguise himself and go out among them. It's unclear how well these trips went, but there's evidence that Nero developed a taste for the simple life and actually became quite fond of the common people. That is, of course, until he murdered his mother and unleashed hell on the empire Caracalla. Caracalla's story is pretty similar to Nero's, in that both men started out with a lot of potential, but ended up turning into monsters. Like Nero, Caracalla also had a bit of an image problem. History remembers him as a cruel, bitter, and vengeful emperor. But before he took the throne in 198 AD, he was considered by many to be the most handsome man in Rome. See, Caracalla was the kind of guy who thought he could do no wrong, and when he learned that the people of Rome didn't share that opinion, he went a little crazy. At first he tried to win them over with free concerts and chariot races, but when that failed, he took the whole sneaking around thing a little too far. Instead of observing the people of Rome, he began terrifying them by showing up at parties, banquets, and gladiator games, sitting silently in the shadows and scaring the wits out of everyone. Then he'd run off before anyone could recognize him. Eventually, he grew tired of this game and just started doing his own thing, murdering people left and right and spending the money like there was no tomorrow. Still, we gotta hand it to him. No one could throw a tantrum quite like Constantine. You know you've gone too far when you convert the entire Roman Empire to Christianity. Constantine took the throne in 306 AD, and by 337 AD, he'd legalized the religion of Christ. Starting with the Edict of Milan, historians still debate how sincere Constantine's conversion was, but there's no denying the impact it had on history. But before Constantine was busy spreading the good word, he was busy spreading goodwill among the common people. While traveling through the empire, he often visited taverns, brothels, and baths in disguise, talking to people about their everyday lives and trying to get a pulse on how the empire was doing. These visits usually ended up being pretty enlightening for the emperor, and he would often take action based on what he heard. For instance, once he heard complaints about judges taking bribes, he decided to switch to a lottery system for jury duty. Another time, he heard that farmers were having trouble collecting olives, so he ordered the soldiers to help pick the olives. Even though some historians claim these stories are apocryphal, there's no denying that Constantine genuinely tried to connect with the people he ruled over. Did any of these surprise you? Let us know in the comments, and check out these other videos we know you'll love.